Here's a simple way to stay connected on the go. Join KHQ on Facebook and Twitter and be a part of the conversation. Just like KHQ Local News on Facebook or follow us on Twitter before your next stop. Experience why more people follow KHQ Local News than any other station in the Inland Northwest. Be the first to know about breaking news, weather, and all the stories creating a social media swirl. Sign up, sound off, stay connected. KHQ Local News, right now.
Welcome to Startup Spokane, where hosts Steve Traben, Ryan Arnold, and Megan Garrett explore the excitement and momentum growing throughout Spokane's expanding startup community.
Welcome to Startup Spokane on Spokane Talks Online, your home for broad and podcasts about everything startup and entrepreneurship related in the Spokane region. We're your hosts, Steve Traben, and with me is Ryan Arnold. Great to be back with our listeners. As you know, on Startup Spokane, we want to provide you with our region's story of entrepreneurship, how we're creating an ecosystem that's attractive not only to our native entrepreneurs, but also to people who are looking for that place to launch their next business and how we're making Spokane attractive to them. We want to educate you about the resources that exist in our region's ecosystem, ways to plug in and connect, and ways you can thrive if you're an entrepreneur or small business. Ryan, let's toss it over to you.
Okay, fair enough. So if you joined us last week, we were talking to Carly and Caleb Ingersoll at the Bartlett, and we were really diving into creative entrepreneurship and discussing with them what creative entrepreneurship really is, if there's a definition or a box to that, and we want to continue that series. So we've got a few different things lined up, but today we're here with two of our guests, Alan Chatham and Ginger Ewing, and Alan, you're running the laboratory right now, and Ginger, you're kind of taking steer of window dressings, a program here in Spokane. So we wanted to dive in today about creative entrepreneurship, what you guys are doing in the community and your separate programs, and I think together, and really just discuss what creativity means for Spokane and how that really relates to entrepreneurship and everything we're doing. So that's sort of the segment this afternoon, and we appreciate you joining with us today. So let's start it off. Alan, you want to kind of take the lead and just tell us about who you are, the laboratory, what you do in Spokane, and your role in sort of creativity in the region.
Thanks, Ryan. So I moved back to Spokane about 3 years ago. I grew up here and then kind of spent a bunch of years traveling throughout the United States and throughout the world. And so kind of coming back for some family reasons, which is a pretty common thing I've noticed with a lot of people. You know, they start to get older in Spokane. You grow up and you hate Spokane, and then you become kind of an adult, and you're like, oh wait, this place is awesome. But yeah, as a part of that, I kind of came back, and I've always been involved in a lot of entrepreneurial type things, kind of both as an artist and as an engineer working with technology. And while I was back helping with family, I decided to start Laboratory. We originally started as a just storefront and gallery for interactive artwork. We did a lot of projection-based medium work down on the corner of Main and Bernard, just kind of as a way to. One thing that I noticed from living elsewhere was just Spokane. Our downtown is really engaged in vibrancy and creating that, but just wanting to be a part of that, kind of taking empty storefronts and installing eye-catching, exciting displays that got people to be excited about downtown. That activity has kind of transitioned and evolved into Laboratory as it is now, which we've really decided to focus on as a artistic residency program for interactive artists, where we bring in artists from all over the world who are specifically working in interactive technology, building kind of installations and artwork where you, the viewer, walk through it and it reacts to your presence, kind of developing this really environmental, immersive experience. And also at the same time kind of developing technology in ways that we don't traditionally see in just the current technological ecosystem, kind of pushing the boundary of what technology can do. And so we bring in artists from all around the world who stay for 1 to 3 months and engage with our community, and they have shows at the end of their time here, kind of showing Spokane, exciting things that are being done in this kind of nascent art form.
Cool. All right. Well, I'd love to dive into it a little bit more with you, but let's hear from you, Ginger, and about what you do in window dressings. And if you want to touch on terrain or anything else, that's great too, because I know you have a lot of hats and are in a lot of different roles in this community, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having me both, Steve and Ryan.
Yeah.
So I started window dressing a couple of years ago, really as a favor to a property owner. As you mentioned, Ryan, I have a nonprofit arts organization called Terrain, and we focus on emerging artists here in Spokane. And we had been operating out of the 1011 West First space location for about 6 years, which had sat empty for 20 years, only with the exception of our event coming in one day, 1 year. So the property owner came to me and said, okay, we have 364 days where this property is not activated. And what can you do to help us activate specifically the storefront to make it a more lively aspect of the landscape and a more engaging aspect of the landscape? So that's kind of where window dressing was bred. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So the more research I did, I kind of went down the rabbit hole of realizing that this wasn't an original idea. There are programs across the nation and internationally that were doing similar things. So I started heavily researching what they were doing. And they were doing both art installations. I should back up. What I came to is doing art installations in vacant storefronts with the idea of getting artists a platform to show their work. It brings visibility, positive visibility to these empty storefronts with the hopes of perhaps finding a paying tenant. And also helps surrounding businesses. It's much better to be next to something that's vibrant than a boarded up building. It increases foot traffic, it decreases vandalism. There's all of these positives for activating our storefront spaces. So started doing a lot of research, and a lot of the programs, as I mentioned, across the nation and internationally are doing these art installations, but they're also putting in creative businesses as well. So window dressing will be launching a creative enterprise track in 2016. It's a very similar idea, taking vacant or underutilized storefronts, but in this case, putting creative businesses or creative entrepreneurs in them. So that's essentially the evolution of window dressing and where we're at today.
Fantastic. Steve, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, Ginger, let's dive further into window dressing. Just let's talk about kind of what's happened so far. I know you've had several art installations, and so let's talk about those, and then also talk a little more about what the creative entrepreneurship track looks like for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So about a little bit over a year ago, Chatham actually approached me. He was running Laboratory and again using his storefront program for digital interactive art. And I was kind of on the opposite side of downtown doing art installations, and those kind of varied throughout. Chatham was actually an artist in one of our installations there, and asked to join forces. And we thought it was a really good idea. And using Chatham's funding, we were able to kind of expand the window dressing program. So instead of doing it as a side project, I became an employee of window dressing, and with really the idea of getting to as many vacant storefronts in the downtown core as possible. So in this last year, we've activated five downtown locations with artwork of 22 different artists, including one international artist who we flew in from Buenos Aires. Our goal is to continue to expand the Artscapes program. I should mention that Artscapes is a borrowed word from Spaceworks Tacoma, which is one of the a similar program that we've studied a lot and who's helped us a lot along the way. And also within 2016, placing a call for creative businesses to kind of launch this new creative enterprise track with the hopes of taking up to 15 small creative businesses kind of under our wing. They'll receive professional development along the way. We'll be partnering hopefully with Spokane Falls Community College Boot Camp and creating a program specifically around creative entrepreneurs and training them. And then after going through that program, finding spaces for those businesses to go into with the idea of giving them up to 6 months free rent, with a caveat that if a property owner finds a paying tenant, we'll vacate within 30 days. But the idea is to give creative entrepreneurs the opportunity to test their ideas with little risk. Not oftentimes, we'll be looking for people who've had a lot of online success. So think Etsy, think farmers markets, and who are burgeoning and really think that they might be on the verge of needing a brick and mortar, or the types of businesses we'll be looking for, and with an emphasis in creativity. So people who are local, who make things with their hands, and who are not selling mass-produced goods. Also community groups that will enrich kind of the surrounding neighborhoods that we'll be going into. This year we'll be focusing on downtown and also East Sprague. With the TIP money, city's money going into East Sprague, we thought that would be smart to kind of partner in that effort. But yeah, that's essentially kind of the creative businesses that we're looking for. And it's really the thinking behind it is giving people the opportunity to experiment. If you go into a brick and mortar and you find out that a brick and mortar is not for you, that's success. Mm-hmm. If you go into a brick and mortar and you want to transition into a paying tenant after 6 months, that's success. If you go into a brick and mortar and say, I do not want to sell T-shirts or soaps or whatever happens to, this is not for me, that's success. And so it's just giving our community the opportunity to be able to play around with those ideas, and it changes the idea of who can and cannot start a business.
You're taking a lot of the risk out of the equation, really, right?
Absolutely.
No long-term 3-year lease, and but gives them a retail space to really test it out, which I like a lot.
I wanted to just jump in from the property owner side too, where you have this awesome thing where we're reducing their risk, both with the training and kind of the curation process that we have for these businesses. It's not just some random person who saw your number on the flyer outside your building. It's people who are coming in with training, with guidance, with support. So we're really trying to guarantee the highest possible quality of tenants that we can. So in that way, we kind of serve as this leasing agent almost.
Yeah, and I guess we should talk a little bit for the developer's sake or the property owner's sake. I mean, we're not asking them in this model to go do a bunch of improvements, right? I mean, can you talk about how we're trying to minimize the impact to a property owner as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're essentially trying to make it have zero risk on the property manager. So window dressing takes on general liability insurance of the space. We have a simple contract where we become the tenants of the space. It's a month-to-month contract, a 30-day contract. And then the businesses and the artists that we're employing become the subtenants of that space. Really, for the Artscapes program, you just need electricity, essentially, so we can light up the art installations. For creative enterprise, just, if the building meets building codes, standard building codes, that's essentially it. The one thing that creative businesses will be asked to do is to take on the utilities. So again, we're kind of taking on all of the risk, although I feel like it's very little kind of from both ways. And then also, as Chatham kind of mentioned, just highlighting a building's potential. One kind of statistic that I always like to talk about is Spaceworks Tacoma, who we've worked really closely with and who I've mentioned before. When they've placed their creative businesses, this is kind of an old number, they've placed more since, but in their first 2 years, they placed 36 businesses, 27 of which have became paying tenants. And so it's, again, as Chatham was kind of alluding to, this is kind of handing over really great businesses to the property owner with really little effort on their part.
That's fantastic. So we got to cut to commercial break, but real quick before we do, how do they get a hold of you if they're interested as a building owner or an entrepreneur or an artist?
Yeah, so we will be placing a major call in June for creative entrepreneurs. We're also actually willing to do some beta testing before that, so you can get a hold of me at Ginger Ewing, and my email address is windowdressingspokane@gmail.com. Or I guess I'll throw my cell phone number out there as well. It's on my business card, which is 509-953-1301. We also have a website, windowdressing.co, and a Facebook page.
Okay, they're cutting us off in the studio, so we'll be right back with Ginger Ewing and Alan Chatham.
In touch, online all the time. SpokaneTalksOnline.com.
As a runner, I push myself. Good enough has never cut it with me. I always want to improve my performance. So when I realized that my house was using more energy than it should, I wanted to improve how it performed too. Thankfully, Avista helped me out. They offer energy efficiency rebates on insulation, high-efficiency water heaters, even smart thermostats. Now, my home runs just like me, in peak condition. Check out Avista's rebates for yourself. Go to avistautilities.com for more information.
Hi, this is Kent Adams, co-host of Business Talks. I'd like to introduce you to a couple of friends, Lisa and Alan Gwaltney of Window World. I've known Lisa and Alan for a number of years and know them to be honest and caring folks. They take pride in their windows, sliding doors, and blinds. So when it comes to your home, call them direct at 509-456-5880. That's Window World of Spokane and Coeur d'Alene. And if you tell them Kent sent me, they'll give you 5% off a 5-window installation. Call them today at 456-5880.
To help you be safe, Washington state law requires you to call 811 2 full business days before you plan, for example, to dig, drill, plow, pull from, or pound anything into the ground. Be prepared to provide the operator with the correct address, cross street, and the description of your work. You must mark the dig area with white paint. The operator will inform you of the utilities notified of your impending excavation. Wait for all their marks. Be safe and dig with care.
Welcome back to Startup Spokane Radio. We're sitting down with Alan Chatham and Ginger Ewing from Window Dressings in the Laboratory, and we've been talking to Ginger quite a bit about window dressings and how to get involved and what the program's all about. Alan, I want to go back to you and chat with you about Laboratory a little bit, and specifically about the residency program and how that works and some of the different residents you've brought in over the last, has it been about a year now you've been running that?
Yeah, we started January last year.
Okay.
So.
All right.
You know, it's been super exciting. We usually host calls. We've hosted about 5 calls last year. We kind of switch between having kind of short 2-month calls and kind of larger periods of time where we just try to pack in as many people as we can. Currently, we have 2 women from Poland who are staying at the Art Institute in Warsaw and just doing amazing. They're building an entire room that they're with installation with string and projection mapping and using Kinects to kind of detect people in the space and light everything up. It'll be in the Richmond Art Gallery next door to the Bartlett at 228 West Sprague, starting in about halfway through March. We haven't picked a date yet, but
excellent.
Yeah. So, hey, so Alan, do some of these folks that become residents in art here in Spokane, do they then segue into an art installation with window dressing? I'm trying to figure out the connection between Laboratory and window dressing. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
So we kind of really connected. Laboratory used to have a storefront space, and since we lost that space at the start of this year, we're probably going to be working specifically with window dressings artscapes track more to offer more space, kind of figuring out places for artists to show. So far, we've been a little bit more kind of figuring out what we can do. We have got some artists who are going to be going into Saranac art projects, for instance, this April. And so it's kind of finding spaces is going to be, we've really been focused on just the resident experience so far. So it's kind of a gap we need to fill now.
And as far as residency programs, for those that aren't familiar with this term or concept, or is this typical in larger cities and mid-sized cities like Spokane, or is this something pretty unique to what you're doing here?
So we're one of 2, to my knowledge, residency programs specifically for interactive artists in the entire United States, the other being in New York City. Residency programs, they're kind of all over in just kind of random places. There are a lot of them that are kind of old farmhouses out in the middle of nowhere where people can get away from it all for a little while. But there are also a lot of programs in kind of urban areas, some that just offer studio space. The place in New York that is doing the same stuff. They're a 5-month-long studio-only residency. They pay a $5,000 stipend for all their artists, but those artists also have to figure out how to survive in New York for 5 months on $5,000. So,
gotcha. And so, for those listening right now, how do people follow the Laboratory so they can track what's coming next for these art installations or anything else that you're doing?
So the best way would be to get on our mailing list. You can sign up at www.laboratoryspokane.com or follow us on Facebook. But we put out a newsletter basically about once a month that kind of gives a recap of who's kind of at our space and when their shows are going to be.
Great. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit toward business entrepreneurship, because the two of you are talking about Laboratory and window dressing, and while they cater to creative entrepreneurs, you're running a business. And so I'm just curious to spend a couple of minutes talking about your experience as an entrepreneurs yourselves and some of your learnings in your journey so far. Go ahead, Ginger.
Yeah, so it's
I know you have more than one.
well, it's interesting you say that because I guess I've never really thought of myself as a business owner, even though technically I am. And I guess essentially my journey just started with a deep love for Spokane. We've been hemorrhaging our young and creative people for decades now. And I wanted to try to find a solution or at least have a voice in trying to stop that. And so window dressing is one of the answers, one of the things I do to answer that call. Terrain is another answer to that call. My husband owns a co-working space, which actually Chatham is a partner in now recently. That also is an answer to that call. And so just finding ways to connect with people and lessen their reasonings for wanting to leave Spokane. And I really do feel like that there's this paradigm shift that's happening of kind of traditional business and how we look at it in Spokane and the creative economy, and those two working hand in hand, not separate of one another, and those two needing each other. So what I mean by that is, traditional business, corporate business in Spokane needs the creative culture, the creative economy, the creative businesses in order to survive, and vice versa. And that's not something we've always seen in Spokane, but it's certainly a shift that I feel is happening, although there's still a lot of work to do. So a good example of that is, big corporate businesses, the Amazons of the world. I don't think Amazon's going to relocate to Spokane anytime soon, but there are tech companies that are looking to relocate to Spokane. And the first thing they're going to look for is the cultural and the creative economy that's happening in Spokane, so their employees have something to do after work. And we're starting to see that in the co-working space on a small level, and other situations around Spokane. And so again, that's kind of my perspective and the creative economy and business in general, and then I guess how I fit into that equation.
Well said. I mean, I couldn't have said it better, and I think Ryan and I spend a lot of time on our soapboxes kind of saying the same things. Alan, how about you from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for me it's all about just finding these little opportunities. I think like Ginger is mentioning, just connection. And just kind of like places that people just aren't necessarily looking. I mean, for instance, with the laboratory residency, interactive art is just starting to be considered as kind of this like fine art discipline. And so somewhere like Spokane has a really awesome opportunity where it's relatively inexpensive to rent space here. And so we can be directly supporting artists at the forefront of what they're doing. Or similarly, like the way that, we are just using information that we know all these awesome creative entrepreneurs who, we think and we're going to help succeed, and business owners or property owners have these spaces, and that, connecting those two groups is like an obvious value proposition, but it's just that information that, that they have the space that, they would love to have rented, but finding a quality tenant is a challenge. And we have a bunch of quality tenants, but no space. And so we can kind of serve that middleman role, and those little opportunities are what excites me.
I think it just makes our downtown core and adjacent neighborhoods even more vibrant. Right?
Absolutely, and it's giving us the opportunity to reimagine the city that we say we want to be, and then also taking some of our challenges and looking at them more as opportunities and what we can do with those opportunities.
Well, I would say just from a lot of the interviews that we've had thus far, I mean, the balance between creative entrepreneurship and traditional business entrepreneurship, while there's similarities, they're different and they complement each other, just like you said, Ginger. And if we want to attract people to our region to start businesses, keep people here to start and grow their businesses, I think we have to have it all from a cultural standpoint. Yeah. Ryan, final questions?
Yeah. So, Ginger, you talked about challenges, opportunities, and I'm always curious, what surprised you most about operating in Spokane? I mean, you have a love for the city. I know, Alan, you do too. Love, hate some days, and that's, I think, residents in any city. But doing work for the last few years and doing what you do, what's surprised you the most about Spokane?
Yeah, I'm absolutely confident that I could not do the work that I'm doing in another city, in some of the cities that we like to compare ourselves to. And what I mean by that is that we've laid enough of a foundation. There have been people who've been pounding the pavement for 20, 30 years, laying the foundation for someone like myself to be able to come in and have a voice. And so there's this foundation that's been laid, but it's not so defined that we, the people around this table can't have a say in helping to build the city that we want it to become. And I guess the biggest thing for me is there have been few incidents where I've been told no in this journey, which is pretty incredible. Up from, city leadership positions to a building owner to, an artist. Everybody has been willing to pitch in and excited and passionate about, building the kind of community that we want to. And so I think just kind of building upon the energy that's already happening. I'm hearing the terms, renaissance and paradigm shifts, and there's a lot of excitement around Spokane right now, and who we are and who we can continue to be. And so I think, just the excitement, the people's willingness to pitch in, to roll up their sleeves. Terrain has like 200 volunteers who show up on a regular basis. I mean, it's incredible what our community is and what they're willing to put into projects that they're passionate about.
That's great.
And Alan, final thought from you on that?
Just thinking about kind of both the benefits, the challenges of working here, just our community, and that, we have a lot of really awesome, really connected people doing a lot of really awesome things within their own groups. One of the things, the challenges that we don't have as much kind of coming and going of people as in a larger city, and so something that the trap I've fallen into is just kind of I hang out with the same people all the time. So just kind of starting to branch out and build connections across kind of those different groups has been kind of something that I've been refocusing on.
That's great. I just want to thank both Alan Chatham and Ginger Ewing for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
On Startup Spokane Radio. And hopefully all of you folks will continue to join us for future Broaden podcasts, where we'll continue to highlight our creative entrepreneurship series. We'll talk to representatives from other aspects of the creative parts of our ecosystem and learn from other creative entrepreneurs about how they were able to launch, grow, and succeed in here, Spokane. We'll also share more resources that help you grow not only creative entrepreneurs, but any entrepreneur in our region, as well as highlight the support resources that are available in our ecosystem. Talk to you next time on Startup Spokane on Spokane Talks Online.
Startup Spokane is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. We wish you a great and profitable day.
Here's a simple way to stay connected on the go. Join KHQ on Facebook and Twitter and be a part of the conversation. Just like KHQ Local News on Facebook or follow us on Twitter before your next stop. Experience why more people follow KHQ Local News than any other station in the Inland Northwest. Be the first to know about breaking news, weather, and all the stories creating a social media swirl. Sign up, sound off, stay connected. KHQ Local News, right now.
Maybe you've noticed a new microchip on your debit card or your credit card. It's all about security. Credit and debit cards with chips in them do better at protecting your private information than traditional cards. The chip generates a one-time code for each transaction. That unique code lets the merchant make the sale, but the thieves can't use it to make fake cards. The chip cards are standard overseas, and now the U.S. is adopting the new technology. To learn more, go to stcumoney.org.